Hello class, I hope everybody is healthy and staying safe. I am here to answer your questions that you left about Hamlet Act I. So I am going to state the person's name, I'm going to tell you what the question is, and then I'm going to answer it, and I'm going to try to go through it as quickly as I can without skipping anything or messing up any information. So the first question that I'm going to address is from Mason Mack. What I'm not 100% sure about is, will the story start making sense for those who are challenged by the reading? So I think that's a good first question because there's a bunch of things about Hamlet I want you to understand. There is murder, there is sex, there is incestual sort of situations going on. There's a lot of deception going on. So there's so much going on there that what kills me is the idea that people are going to get so bogged down by the language that they miss all of these things. So I think, yes, it will get easier as you go. My 100th time reading it is better than my 99th time reading it. That said, they do have these side-by-sides where you can read Hamlet, and right next to it you can read a more modern version of Hamlet. So I'm going to either upload a file for that or leave you a link so that you can do that. And I think if you're able to put that modern language side by side with the Shakespearean language, that will start to make more sense to you. However, the other thing that I want to say is I don't want you to just read the modern version, because there are a lot of important things, a lot of important nuances in the Shakespeare version that are really important to the story. So use the modern version as a way to help you start to understand the Shakespeare version. Don't just use it as, you know, as your number one go-to. It should be like your number two or your supplement for that. Okay, so hopefully that helps. So William says, is Hamlet talking to us, or is this just a poor performance from the actor or direction from the director? The one burning question I have with the play is the validity of the ghost. Is it true that the ghost is his father and the things he says are valid? So, a couple of things about that. Number one, you have to keep in mind that Hamlet was designed to be a play. So a lot of times Hamlet, the only way you could really know what Hamlet is thinking is if he turns to the audience and tells the audience. So those monologues that he gives are hugely important because you get a real look at how he's thinking, how he's really thinking, and what he's really feeling. More so than I think when he's around people most of the time. Except later when you see him with his mom, that is going to be a really big deal. The validity of the ghost, the one thing I want to say about that is to keep in mind, I don't want to give too much away going forward if you've never read this before or seen it before, but it's not the last time we see the ghost. However, this time that we see the ghost is really important because you have to keep in mind that there are other people there. There are other witnesses there. Okay, so that says a lot. That's mostly why I think it's important to have the guards there and have Horatio there, because that is sort of your confirmation that the ghost definitely appeared at that point. Okay, so keep that in mind going forward, because when we see the ghost again, the circumstances are going to be different. Shabsi asked, my one question for the video is, what is Polonius's family doing in the book? More specifically, what is Ophelia there for? So a couple of things you want to keep in mind. Polonius and his family more or less have come up with the royal family. Okay, so Polonius works for the king. Polonius is like the king's right-hand man, but the family is close with the royal family. So they're not royalty too, but you'll find that Laertes and Hamlet look at each other like close cousins or brothers. And Ophelia is there because Ophelia is Hamlet's love interest, basically. And her role is important because as Polonius is working with the king to try to figure out why Hamlet is so emotionally messed up, they chalk it up to him not seeing Ophelia anymore. Okay, so that becomes like this sort of focus for Polonius. Like, this is why Hamlet is messed up. I know it. I know it's because of my daughter, because I told my daughter not to talk to him anymore. Okay, so now later on, Laertes does come back to the play toward the very end. One of the things I always say about Laertes, who is Polonius' son and Ophelia's brother, is how different would this story have been had Laertes not left, had he not gone to France? Because the one thing you'll find about Laertes is that he's young, he's smart, he's capable, and Polonius is none of those things, which sort of leaves Ophelia on her own out there during all of this. In my opinion, she's one of the most tragic characters in all of Shakespeare, and you'll see why going forward. Madison says, the one thing I'm a little confused about is why no one's suspecting the uncle of foul play. Like, there was no one looking into the king's abrupt death, no questions, and immediately after the uncle becomes king and marries Hamlet's mother. So I don't think it's that people aren't questioning it. I want you to keep that in mind. The kingdom and the people of the kingdom, they're not totally okay with this. Like, there is a lot of unrest amongst the kingdom. Imagine your own government, every time they pull something that is less than honorable. We know about it. People get mad about that. Okay, this is not like normal for someone to marry their brother-in-law. Like, this doesn't, because I've heard students say in the past that was more common back then. It's not common. It's not okay with anybody, and it's clearly not okay with Hamlet. And nobody is suspecting the uncle of foul play because the way the king died, if you listen to him at the end, they think that he was stung by a serpent. So they think he died from a snake bite, and that the snake venom killed him. He was asleep in his orchard, and then he died from poison. So they have no reason to suspect the uncle. Again, however, keep in mind something. Hamlet is smart. He might be smarter than everybody. He's not the most capable guy in the world the whole time, but he is smart. And he does know that he does feel that something is wrong with this, but even he doesn't really suspect Claudius. Claudius comes off more as an opportunist. Oh, this is my chance to be king now. I'm going to move right in here. And I'll answer more questions about Gertrude later because somebody had questions about Gertrude. So to answer Abigail's question, why would he still be crowned king? And there is another question about that too. Somebody else asked, how is he king, and whether or not Hamlet cares about the kingdom. So there are some extra things here to take a look at. Primogeniture versus Tanistry, elective monarchy. When we typically think of monarchies, we think of a system called primogeniture. This is the system in which the king's eldest son and his descendants take the throne. However, this was not the common system for succession in Scandinavian countries. They followed a system of elective monarchy. Some sources call it tanistry, which is the election of the monarch by choosing from the eldest and worthiest of the previous monarch's surviving family. Naturally, if this is how the monarchy system works, then Claudius would be the more natural choice, especially if he had married Gertrude. That connection would provide continuity between monarchs and make the transition easier for the masses to accept. Furthermore, also at the time of his father's death, Hamlet would have been away at school in Wittenberg. Even if he did disagree with the electoral's choice, he could not defend himself to them because he would not have been there. Yeah. So again, just to be clear, maybe that's the reason that it happened. Maybe she was also feeling trauma from the loss of her husband and made that decision. But either way, it seems like there is a lot of unrest in the kingdom, and it seems like it's definitely not okay with Hamlet that this is the way things happen. I mean, he refers to Claudius as his uncle father and his mother as his aunt mother all the time. He's taking shots at them. So that's the best explanation for that I can give you. By the sound of Hamlet, he makes the readers really think that his parents were severely in love. Why is that? Is there something underlying within the family? So I can't find any evidence in the text that there was anything going on before Hamlet's father died. However, I don't blame anybody for thinking that she was cheating or was having an affair with Claudius. But again, there's no solid evidence of that in the text. Maybe someone could pull things out of the text and argue for that, which I've had a student do in the past. But the one thing too I want you to keep in mind is I want you to look at these situations like they're real people under real stress. A lot of times when people go through a traumatic event, they make a lot of really, really strange decisions. So that's why, like, if you take the case of, like, Casey Anthony, for example, one of the things that they always put up there as evidence that she killed her daughter was that she went clubbing while people were looking for her daughter. Now, that does sound messed up, and I'm not saying it's not, but if you review people who have been through traumatic experiences, sometimes they do things that are way out of character. So you also have to understand that she is probably heartbroken at the death of her husband. This is her brother, who probably looks like him and sounds like him, and she might be reacting to that traumatic event. When it comes to Gertrude, I find her to be one of the most fascinating characters in the story, because she's one of the most difficult ones for me to get a read on in terms of her intentions. Were his parents really in love? You know, I don't know. Somebody else asked the question too about whether or not his father was really this great person. I have a friend whose father was abusive growing up, and after his father died, my friend went around talking about what a saint his dad was for years. And then all of a sudden one day he was like, "Why do I keep saying that? He wasn't a saint. What am I talking about?" So sometimes people really focus on the good when they lose somebody, even if there was some bad there. But again, I don't really see any evidence that his father was a bad guy exactly. He was just sounded like just a king like everybody else. Let's see. Nicholas, is Claudius doing this out of his best interest, or is there something we've not been told? And he was asking about Claudius acting like a father figure toward Hamlet and trying to get Hamlet not to go to England. So a couple of things. This is very important. Couple of things here. The kingdom loves Prince Hamlet, okay? And they are not happy with the arrangement between the new king and the queen right now. So it's in Claudius's best interest to have Hamlet stay in the castle, because if Hamlet stays, it looks like Hamlet approves of the situation. If he approves of the situation, then that works out for Claudius much better. Maybe he can settle some of the unrest in the kingdom. So it's in his best interest at this point to keep Hamlet there, okay? And Claudius is an opportunist, man. He says, "Oh, it'll make your mom happy. That'll make your mom happy." The truth is, he needs Hamlet to stay there. He needs the kingdom to see him as king. If Hamlet accepts it, maybe the kingdom will accept it. So he's doing everything he can right now. Now, you'll also find in that monologue that Claudius gives at first, he also takes shots at Hamlet left and right, man. He calls Hamlet unmanly for grieving for his father at one point, which is terrible. Kayla asked, I don't know if this is a question, but I really want to know how Hamlet and his father's relationship was before his death. I assume they were close if Hamlet is willing to seek revenge for his death, which implies he's going to murder someone for his father. So again, the only real thing that we have to go on is whatever Hamlet tells us. So if Hamlet tells us that his father, that this was the relationship with his father, it makes it seem that way. Again, that's the best that we have to go on. Whether or not he's going to get revenge, you're going to have to wait and see, and we will find out. Brianna says, is Hamlet seeing the real ghost of his father, or is he seeing him because he is crazy? In my opinion, there were no actual evidence that supports the idea the ghost is real. Watching helped me understand the scene between Hamlet and the ghost, but it also left me unsure if I understand correctly what the ghost is asking him. One question I have is, why does Marcellus believe that Horatio should speak to the ghost? This makes me believe the ghost is real and Hamlet isn't crazy. So again, keep in mind, this is not the last time that we see the ghost, but the first time we see the ghost is very different than when we see the ghost later. Okay, so he does have people there. Now, why did the ghost come to visit those guards? Maybe King Hamlet felt like these were the guards he could trust the most. Maybe he realized that this was the furthest away from people that he could get. The store sort of stay out of the public eye. Maybe he knew these were the guys that were going to bring the right people in. Bringing Horatio into the mix was probably a smart thing to do, because Horatio is one of Hamlet's best friends, if not his best friend in the world. Horatio is one of the few people in this play that you can trust completely and that Hamlet can trust completely. So again, maybe the ghost had an idea. If I present myself to these guys, they'll bring in the right people, and sooner or later they'll get my son up here, and I can talk to my son. So at this point, the other thing that I think is important to mention is, and I might have just said this a little while ago, is that we have confirmation that the ghost is really there. We have confirmation the ghost is really there because there are witnesses, okay? That's important to keep in mind going forward. Let's see, Yulia asks, finally, burning question, why isn't Prince Hamlet a king now? And how is everyone around, especially the queen, accepting that the uncle should be rightful king? As I was reading the act for the first time, I thought maybe something is wrong with Prince Hamlet, that they are not sure he can be a proper king during this hard time, but I didn't see any bad traits about his character besides being heavily depressed over the situation. He seems intelligent and thoughtful. Also, does Hamlet care about being a king himself or about the kingdom? I would say Hamlet does care about the kingdom. Shelby asks, one question I have about Act 1 is, can Hamlet trust Horatio and the guards? Will Claudius find out about the ghost, and if so, how will he react? So I'm going to hold off on the how will Claudius find out about the ghost. You'll find out about that later on. I can tell you that Hamlet can trust Horatio. I think that's important to keep in mind. Horatio is his like I said, his best friend. Probably one of the few people in the world he can trust. In terms of the guards, so one thing you'll find about Shakespeare is Shakespeare gives every character some element of a personality, right? Even if the characters aren't huge or major, or if they just sort of come and go, if they just sort of come and go, you'll find that I don't think we even see these guards again. I think the guards play a role right in that first I think the first act, I'm sorry. They play a role there because they're needed to confirm whether or not the ghost is real, which we get from them. And I don't think we ever see from them or hear from them again. But again, keep in mind something else too. This should tell you something. They didn't go to King Claudius about this. They went to Prince Hamlet about this. Okay, so you're also talking about there's unrest within the ranks as well. Why would you not go to the king? Why would you go to the prince? Because a lot of people have respect for Prince Hamlet. They're not carrying that respect over to Claudius. They're not sure they like this situation that's going on with Claudius, I don't think. At least that would be my argument, in all the years that I've studied this. Joseph asks, one question I have is, why did the ghost of Hamlet's father go toward the guards first, and what is so special about them? So I just said before, I feel like maybe the ghost knew this was the best way to get his son involved so he could speak to his son. That to me sounds like probably the most logical answer to that question. Alec asks, what kind of relationship did the family of Hamlet have before the king was murdered? Again, we don't have a whole lot to go on that other than the way Hamlet makes it sound. Hamlet makes it sound as if his father was this benevolent being and that he had this loving relationship with his mother. And again, that's really all we have to go on. Okay, we can also say that it also seems as though the unrest in the kingdom is new since the death of King Hamlet. That does not sound like something that's been going on for a long time. So perhaps the kingdom and the people of the kingdom, perhaps they did like him. Maybe he was a good king. Brittany asks, Act 1, how come people didn't put two and two together about how the king died in the first place? I didn't understand why Hamlet's mother married Claudius when King Hamlet died. So I addressed that a little bit earlier. And again, keep in mind, nobody has any reason to think that somebody would kill King Hamlet. Probably least of all would be his own brother. So even though this whole thing looks really bad, it seems like the person who's most aware of that is Hamlet himself. At this point, once the queen says this is the new king, who's going to come forward and start questioning the new king at that point? Probably not many people. But yeah, it's a twisted situation. It's noticeably twisted, and the various points I've brought up so far should tell you that I don't think everybody trusts this situation. Cameron asked, if this was my first time reading Hamlet, one question I would have at the end of Act 1 would be, what is Hamlet going to do about knowing that Claudius killed his father? Right, so that is important. So this brings me to another thing too. Hamlet, you know what? I'm going to let it go because there's another question that I can address that will give less away. I guess people are going to have to find out, what is Hamlet going to do? I mean, that's really, if you think about it, that's the plot of the entire story. What is Hamlet going to do about this? Okay? So Emily asked, one part that was confusing was when Hamlet was in the ballroom. I think it was the ballroom, I'm not too sure what to call it, speaking to himself. I wasn't completely sure about what was going on there and who he was talking to or talking about. So I said earlier that this is a play to be viewed on stage. So in order for you to know what Hamlet is thinking and feeling, he has to address the audience in a way. Now, the one thing you'll find about productions of Hamlet is that directors take different creative control over it. So sometimes I feel like he's more, looks like he's talking to himself. In other productions, it's like he looks right at the audience or right at the camera and speaks. These moments are hugely important, again, because you know what he's really thinking and really feeling, because he's alone. He doesn't have anybody to perform in front of, so to speak. Bobby asked, in my opinion, Horatio seemed very skeptical. So that wasn't a question. He had just pointed out that early on, Horatio was skeptical of the ghost. That is 100% true. At one point, one of the guards says, "Is Horatio with you?" And Horatio says, "A piece of him." And what he means is, yeah, I'm kind of here. I don't really buy any of this. I don't think there's a ghost, but yeah, I guess I'm here. That's kind of his way of saying that. Stevie Lynn asked, the first question being, what is he going to do? Is he going to get revenge for his uncle? My second question was, what is the true reason for Hamlet's mom to move on so fast? Why did she marry her deceased husband's brother? Okay, so I feel like I addressed this a little bit in terms of whether or not he's going to get revenge. You're going to have to wait and see on that one. I can't give that away just yet. But again, keep in mind what I said earlier about what grief can do to a person. So I think that's my best answer right now. Julia, I just don't get why Hamlet's father does not equally as much want revenge on his cheating and deceiving ex-wife. Does she know Claudius killed her late husband? Did she stand behind his decision so they could be together? So, this is partly what makes Gertrude such an interesting character to me. Hamlet's father, I don't think, wants revenge on his wife and instructs Hamlet not to take anything out on his mother for two reasons. One, he still loves his wife. And you will see that later on. There is some evidence of that. I think he still loves his wife despite what has happened and what she has done. And I also think he thinks, God's going to take care of whatever he needs to take care of after she's dead and gone. So he does not want Hamlet to go after her. Maybe too, he feels some sympathy for her and her decisions. Again, I can't find any straightforward evidence that she had anything to do with her husband's death. Nowhere does it explicitly say that she had any idea what was going on. And later on, you will get more evidence of that, I think. So pay attention going forward. Tyrell asks, one question I have is about Hamlet's sanity. Seeing and talking to a ghost, plotting to kill his uncle and assume the crown almost seems like something we'd expect from a villain. So let's keep in mind something. What we find out by the end of Act 1 is that Hamlet's father was murdered. And now he's murdered by a man who is the acting king. Okay? One thing you're going to find about Hamlet is he almost underreacts to things. It's almost hard for him to get a lot of things done. And that includes dealing with his uncle. But before he makes any moves, the one thing that Hamlet is, and this should be evident in the way he explains his feelings, is he is a thorough human being. Okay? He wants to know for an absolute fact that this is his father's murderer before he acts. Now, in a way, this sort of leads me to talk a little bit about Fortinbras. You guys keep hearing about Fortinbras. Fortinbras from Norway, right? You're going to find going forward that Hamlet kind of envies Fortinbras, because when Fortinbras finds out that when Fortinbras finally has the means to avenge his father's death, he amasses an illegal army and starts marching across the country with it, no questions asked. Okay? Fortinbras is a prince. Fortinbras's father was killed. Fortinbras's father was killed by Hamlet's father in battle. Okay? So, and his uncle is more or less running things too. So there are some parallels here between these families that you're seeing too. So again, Hamlet almost envies Fortinbras's ability to pull his act together and go get revenge. Hamlet is slow, he is calculated. Again, maybe too calculated at times. A lot of times the argument is Hamlet able to get anything done? Is Hamlet stalling to get things done because he's worried about what the facts are? Or is he stalling to get things done because he's a coward? And at one point you will find Hamlet even asks himself whether or not he's a coward. Okay? So keep that in mind. Anahid has a couple of points to make. Would this be a forbidden love story? I suppose it could be considered a forbidden love story. Will Ophelia disobey her father and continue talking to Hamlet? One thing about Ophelia that is really, really painful, and you'll notice this about Gertrude too a little bit, is how little power she has over her own life. It's sad to watch. So she does what her father instructs, but you can tell that it's really tearing her apart. Is she already in love with Hamlet but cannot confess since her family is against it? I think the two of them have already confessed their love for one another. So I think that's clear in their behavior towards one another, even though Hamlet gets really, really nasty with Ophelia at times. Will Polonius do anything to harm Hamlet? That's something you're going to have to wait and see. The one burning question I have, though, is did Gertrude have an affair with Claudius before he killed Hamlet's father? Again, there's no evidence in the text that says that. I could see why somebody would think that. And again, maybe you can find things in the text that you could use to argue that. If you're using, if you're analyzing the text and that is your goal to prove that. But again, there is nothing straightforward in your face that says that happened. So I hope that this video answered everybody's questions. I hope that this was helpful. Please read below because I'm going to give you something to write for this class today. And I hope to do this again next week. Like I said, I hope you guys like this. Be safe and be careful. All right, talk soon.